There's new evidence. Well, I don't know. I mean, how new? But there's video evidence now of the killing of. We had mentioned this Palestinian-American reporter, and there was some controversy in some circles as to how she died. Supposedly, according to the Israeli government, she died in crossfire. Well, there is video evidence now that makes it quite clear that there was no crossfire. You don't see the moment that this woman was shot and killed, but you do see that she is shot in an alley. It is disturbing video. We're not going to play it. And it is quite clear that there's a sniper who is firing at people trying to get her and save her, or not save her, but I guess recover her body. And it's not a crossfire situation. It is Israeli sniper fire, keeping people out of an alley. And it really, to be frank, I mean, I don't know why people would be surprised.
It was obvious from the get-go. And, a reminder that they were wearing press vests and helmets, too. It's very obvious that they are press. And very, very obvious. Almost like, to be honest with you, in some ways, that was the most disturbing part of seeing it, is that this you cannot look at that and say that wasn't deliberate. I mean, somebody's got a sniper. They know exactly what they're shooting at. That vest is quite clear. And you had the quote from the Israeli spokesperson saying they were armed, if you will, with cameras. Yes, with cameras.
Yes.
I mean, how much more do we need to see?
This coming amid a report in The Intercept that documents show that in 2021, arms made and funded by the United States destroyed UN schools, USAID projects, and a Coca-Cola plant in the Gaza Strip. Israel deployed hundreds of bombs, missiles, and shells, killing over 240 Palestinians, wounding more than 1,900 others. More than half of the dead were civilians. This, according to the Israeli think tank Meir Amit Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center, that is despite Israeli claims that it only targets combatants from Hamas and Palestinian militant groups. Again, the Gaza Strip is basically an open-air prison where you have at least a 50% unemployment rate. You have crumbling infrastructure. It's been bombed over and over again, but of course it is a prison. There's nothing they can get in really to fix these things. Toxic water. It is a very difficult place to be living in.
Funded by our tax dollars.
Funded by our tax dollars. Here is AOC, who got on to an Instagram video to talk about that.
I think it's really important for us to have eyes on what happened with Shireen Abu Akleh in Palestine. She was killed by Israeli forces. And we can't allow, we can't allow this stuff to be happening with our resources. Like, a lot of times people say, you're treating this differently, and you're picking them out and treating them differently. Our tax dollars are a part of this.
It is that freezing, or is that the end of the clip? Okay. And she has to be fairly measured or careful with her words, because you've seen the slightest bit of sense that if someone comes out and speaks against what Israel is doing, and you're running for office, you are inviting millions upon millions of dollars to flood in. We saw it against Summer Lee. We saw, Fetterman, I think, had to even be careful not to sort of trigger that money, but we've seen it across the country. And I'm just giving examples from the past 2 weeks. We've seen it across the country. AIPAC comes in, funded by Republicans. They end up being sort of a cover probably for some conservative Democrats as well. But AIPAC, that is the, it's the sort of the Paul Wolfowitz. We could all agree on the weapons of mass destruction. And so they come in and dump money to attack these politicians. And she's also trying to be sensitive, it seems to me, about charges of anti-Semitism, which you also inevitably get when you talk about Israel, and as if it's a double standard. And we should not be in any way supportive of the Saudi regime. And we will continue to be, because they leverage their oil and they leverage oil prices and the politics associated with that. But we should not be. But let's be clear. Israel is the greatest recipient of U.S. aid in the world. And I mean, short of, I guess, Ukraine at this point in terms of military, but on an annual basis. And we have every right as a country to make an assessment of where that aid is going. And the military money that we provide ends up going to destroy some of the humanitarian stuff that we do in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank.
It massively outweighs it. I mean, our aid to Israel versus the money that we send.
Well, yes, but my point is like the aid to Israel we send is used to destroy the other. I mean, that was the story today. That was what she's reacting to. And so this is going to happen. It is simply a matter of time that the U.S. government, at least in the context of the Democratic Party, and it may take 5, 10 years, it may take 20 years. At one point, it's going to happen because, and to a large extent, I've had this argument with other Jews who are, more blindly supportive of Israel. I'm like, you're responsible for what's going to happen because you are not allowing the politics to take place. Like the political marketplace, if you will, because sometimes you need to talk to these people in this matter, is being distorted. Mm-hmm. Because of Christian Zionism in this country and because of some wealthy donors, the ability for American politicians to criticize Israel has been artificially denied.
Yes.
And therefore, Israel just continues to follow a path that is both unjust and inhumane, apartheid. And these are not my words. Well, these are my words, but these are also the words, I should say, of like many
humanitarian groups
and Israeli officials and former Israeli officials. And it will lead to an incredible isolation of Israel down the road. And you talk about, if a threat to Israel, it is they are going to reap what they are sowing. And anybody who prevents the American government and the American people from responding to it, this is like one of those situations like, friends don't like their friends drive drunk. I mean, this is one of those situations we keep throwing the keys at them and pouring alcohol down their mouths. And at one point, it's going to be, it is going to be a disaster.
Can we just pull this up really quickly? Because I wanted to highlight this as well. This is from The Guardian. Just so, there's the murder of a journalist is obviously going to raise alarm bells, and it's incredibly tragic. And, it's very clear, seemingly, that IDF forces did this. If you could just scroll down to the part where it starts with earlier this month. Earlier this month, Israel's Supreme Court finally ruled in the 2-decade-old legal case over the area's fate. This is a small area in the southern part of the West Bank. The land can be repurposed for military use, upholding the Israeli Defense Forces' argument that Palestinians living here could not prove they were resident before the firing zone was established in 1981. The decision, one of the most significant on expulsion since the occupation began in 1967, paved the way for the eviction of everyone living here. So basically, all of these families are going to become homeless based on these demolitions because the IDF is claiming that this area needs to be repurposed for military use. So, like, not only are journalists being murdered, and those should be moments of emphasis and punctuation, but really, this is all a part of the systemic ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And that's going to be the context that this always should be viewed in. There's always going to be outbreaks of violence, and Palestinians are going to retaliate because of what's happening here. Or maybe even be preemptive, but it's all within the context of larger, systemic, decades-long ethnic cleansing. And it's going to continue to happen. And of course, the court sides with the IDF, the Israeli court, and the Palestinians have no standing there. Naturally, it's rigged against them, and it's going to blow. The water's going to boil eventually there.